I'm sure you'll appreciate that some of us who have been invited here perhaps should be in the museum by now, by virtue of the number of days and months and years that were spent on this planet. To be the chairman or co-chairman of this occasion is a great honor and great privilege for me. Having been born a Nigerian, but a British Nigerian, in the sense that those of us who are born before 1914, or those of us who are born after 1914 up to 1960, could describe ourselves in various forms and terms. I, having been born 86 years ago, I was born a Nigerian British Nigerian. That's what I was. And I believe there are quite a few of us here who are British Nigerians. And up to 1960, when Britain left us alone to manage our affairs, we were such. And for me, really, I've seen Nigeria as a British colony, administered by the British people. And they decided in 1914 to invite some of our elders to a meeting where some far-reaching decisions will be taken in terms of the future of the country. And by that, I mean the promulgation edict that was discussed in 1914 included 6 eminent Nigerians, or 6 eminent people, because at that time, before the meeting, they were not Nigerians. It was after the 1914 that we assumed a new name, or a name referred to as Nigeria. If you read that edict, for those of you particularly with penchants for law, like Dogara will see the content of that edict. It was an edict because it was a decision mainly by former British military officers who were governing us, in various ways in the country as a colony. And they couldn't have used any other term than an edict. And after that edict was approved in their meeting, this was then referred to the colonial office, and it was adopted that this new nation was then born. Nigeria was born by that declaration in the edict. So, for those who are curious like me, I read quite a bit of that edict, and it was an edict of hope that the Nigerians that were colonized from Lagos to southern part up to the northern part in 1903 would now be regarded as a country, and that country would be named Nigeria. It is of interest to hear that maybe I'm wrong here, the historians are here. It was the governor, the wife of the governor, or I think the governor general, that in fact gave us our name, Nigeria. Now, the content of that edict was simply that the people that had been put together under that edict are called Nigeria, and the people within Nigerians will now move forward and over the years build a country that they could call their own, and others would also respect as a country different from theirs. And I think that the edict was very clear. In fact, it said the life of the edict was just 100 years. The edict will expire after 100 years. So technically and statistically, this edict expired in 2014, exactly 100 years after. But we did not do anything in a very special way to say that that edict no longer existed and so on, but it was there. But the content was very, very important. And if you read the content, you then consider why we're here today as very, very important. The elements in the edict were simply that the people who were conquered by the British from the southern part of Nigeria, Lagos and others, including the north, of course, are now agreed that they are going to build a country. And this country will be called Nigeria. And they should be working very hard to make sure that they succeeded. And from time to time, they should create opportunities to assess the kind of progress that was being made towards that objective of building a country. And I took it that they were doing that, particularly when we get back to the point when our first generation leaders in the country were working towards getting Britain out as a colonial master towards our independence. And they did extremely well, in my view. They worked together, coming from different places and so on. Just as we are still from different places today, they were even more in different places at the time when they decided that they should get themselves together and see whether they can really produce a good country for all of us. And they did. No. So I think that if you look at what they did, one of the quotations that I always use, particularly when people are quarreling about themselves, where do you come from, what language do you speak, which place of worship do you attend, weekly or daily, as the case may be. The Sadhana came with the idea that we can't all melt into one tribe, we can't all melt into one language, we can't can't melt all in one faith just because we want to be called Nigerians. No. So the important thing is for people from these different backgrounds and different antecedents and so on, is to continue to dialogue and understand their differences. Once they can understand their differences, they should be able to work together towards building a country. And this was the spirit behind their working together up to the point Nigeria had achieved independence. Not that Sadona ceased to be a Fulani man, not that Chifawolo ceased to be a Yoruba man, no Zik ceasing to be an Igbo man. But they work together because they try to understand their differences. And these differences will always be there forever, more or less. There's nothing you can do about it. It is not your work in the creation of Almighty. And in the various scriptures, I'm not good in all the scriptures, it said, we created you in different nations and so on, so that you can understand each other and live together. So here, I think that going back to the main theme of this dialogue, what is dialogue about? Dialogue, as the master of ceremony has eloquently described, is a situation where you sit down, discuss, and try to resolve matters that are not quite clear to many, or are not understood by many, and so on and so forth, so that you can eventually get closer together in your understanding of issues that are important to all of us. And this is where we are today. As I said, I was born a British Nigerian, as many of us here are. In 1961, the British left us. But even then, I think the Queen remained our head of state until another declaration was made, I think in 1962 or thereabout, for Nigeria to become a republic, so that the headship of government returns fully to the people of Nigeria. Now, those who captured us or conquered us left behind a system that was familiar to them. This is the British parliamentary system, was what was bequeathed to Nigeria at independence. And we can't deny that. And we accepted it. Our leaders went to all sorts of conferences within and outside the country to accept parliamentary system of government, and they tried it. And for some of us who saw it and were part of it, we think it worked for us. It worked for us. The system they left behind was a federal parliamentary system where there is a federal government and there are the original governments. And the region I come from, or I came from and still come from, is northern Nigeria. And when I started my public service in 1964 after graduating from Ibadan, I started in the north. The north had its own constitution, like the west had its own constitution, the east had its own constitution. There was a federal constitution. And all appeared to be working in harmony, and things were going on fairly well. Until some, perhaps, people a little more in a hurry decided that that system was not working, and it was overthrown. Some would say that was the beginning of our crisis. I would say yes and no to this, because after we discovered our mistakes and the tragedy that befell us after that, we should have thought again, why did we fail if we failed under the parliamentary democracy that we accepted the independence? Why? Why did we fail if we failed at all? Why did the young boys who decided to uproot it do so? And so on. These are the various questions that ought to be resolved very, very clearly, but unfortunately, for a number of reasons, this was not the case. The country almost broke up, thanks to some elders and some soldiers. Nigeria remained after 1966, but without continuing a crisis that ended us up in a civil war, which again was eventually resolved. General Gowon, head of state in 34 years, who led the country for 9 years, did extremely well together with elders. In his cabinet, or rather in his government, rather than cabinet, there are elders, Chief Awolowo, Nnamdi Kanu, and the rest of them were working very closely with General Gowon that made it possible for him to run this country for 9 years, including the crisis we went through in the Civil War. It is of interest to note that for those 9 years, Nigeria did not borrow a kobo from outside. We wonder why. But that's not for me, but for the dialogue people to really unravel a lot of things that have gone wrong since then. Never mind what happened. Then, after Gowon's 9 years, there was a decision to reverse to what people call democracy. Democracy has very elastic meaning. Every country in the world today claims democracy. America claims democracy. China claims democracy. Most countries claim democracy. So democracy must have multiple meanings, flexible meanings, and so on. So it's right for us here to ask what kind of democracy do you want to have? And it's also right to insist that we can have a homegrown democracy, and our children who are versed at a lot of things should be able to do so. But then there was a transition between military and civil rule, and there was a disagreement in terms of how this should happen. And to my mind, that was our first major mistake. I was a candidate, I was one of those who should have been in the Constituent Assembly of 1975-76 to discuss the constitution that was transistors from military rule to civil rule. I remember our elders then, Malam Aminu Kanu and others, who gather around in Lagos to say that the military leaders have insisted that there would be no discussion on parliamentary democracy. The Constituent Assembly was not to discuss parliamentary democracy. The Constituent Assembly should go and borrow or find a presidential system outside the country. I think what they had in mind And I think up to now, the two parliamentary systems that are a little all over the place, American and the French. And eventually, we opted for the presidential system. Well, to my mind, America has just had an election a few days ago. And to my mind, it did not demonstrate democracy. It demonstrated election, but it did not demonstrate democracy. For me, that was our first mistake. For us to bring a system that did not fit our history, did not fit our traditions, did not fit our experience either as under colonial government or under our own independent state. We did not. Yet, we were not allowed to even discuss it. If I can remember here my classmate, a very eloquent sociologist, Dr. Ibrahim Taher, up to his death, he insisted that it was a mistake for us to bring in American presidential system to Nigeria, because it will not work for us. And if the parliamentary system had not worked for us, just after using it for 5 years, now we have experienced presidential system for 24 years. Dogara is here to testify. 24 years. With due respect, I think our situation is worse than under the parliamentary system that we rejected just after trying it for 4 or 5 years. So this dialogue here should really be as objective, dispassionate as possible, to look at some of the things that we did wrongly. And one of the things we did wrongly was to bring in a system that did not fit our situation. And if we can, and we should, and we can, we should work out something. It may not necessarily be the typical parliamentary system you find in our former colonial masters. Well, it could be something else, but definitely the presidential system has not worked for us. And it should be possible for us to be less sentimental, more objective in really bringing this out clearly. And there are questions I would like to ask, especially those who would be on the panel to tell us yes or no. I will ask these questions later to illustrate the point that the presidential system has failed Nigeria over the last 24 years, and there's need for us to change to something else. Thank you very much.